It was just another morning in Plano, Texas. The sun had barely stretched its golden fingers across the sky, and the neighborhood was waking up, runners lacing their shoes, the hum of coffee makers filling quiet homes. But for one woman, this morning would be her last. Sarmistha Sen, a devoted mother, a brilliant cancer researcher, a woman who believed in saving lives, set out on her usual jog, never realizing she was being watched. She had no idea that just a few hours later, her body would be found at the edge of a creek, and the man responsible? He was already in police custody, for something else entirely. A brutal crime. A chilling twist. And a question that still lingers in the minds of many: was she just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was this something more sinister? This is the story of the shocking murder of Sarmistha Sen, and the man who left a community in fear. Sarmistha Sen was more than just a name in the headlines. She was a daughter, a sister, a wife, and a mother. A woman whose days were spent researching cures for cancer, and whose mornings always began the same way, running along the Chisholm Trail, breathing in the crisp Texas air, lost in her thoughts. She wasn't just running for fitness, she was running toward a future she was building for her children. Born in India, Sarmistha had always been driven. She earned her degree in pharmacy before coming to the United States to pursue higher education. Science was her passion, but healing was her purpose. She dedicated her life to cancer research, working tirelessly at UT Southwestern Medical Center, hoping to find breakthroughs that could save lives. She believed in the power of knowledge, the power of perseverance. And most of all, she believed in kindness. Her colleagues admired her intelligence. Her friends cherished her warmth. And her family, they were her entire world. She was the kind of person who remembered birthdays, who sent handwritten notes, who always had time for one more hug. But in the shadows of that bright morning, something evil was waiting. While Sarmistha Sen was building a future, another man was unraveling. Bakary Bayona Moncrief. A name unknown to most, until the morning of August 1, 2020. But his past? It held warning signs, signs that perhaps had gone unnoticed for too long. Moncrief's life had been marked by instability. From an early age he exhibited erratic behavior, outbursts of rage, and a growing disdain for authority. He had a history of mental illness, voices, delusions, and ever-present paranoia that seemed to control him. And yet, his encounters with the law were often dismissed as minor offenses. Trespassing. Disturbing the peace. Until they weren't so minor anymore. In the months leading up to the murder, his behavior became increasingly disturbing. He believed he was chosen. That he had a mission. And that morning, as Sarmistha Sen tied her running shoes and stepped out the door, he was already there. Watching. Waiting. Some would later say it was random. A senseless act of violence. But was it? Or was Sarmistha's fate sealed the moment she crossed paths with Bakary Moncrief? One woman. One morning. One encounter that would change everything. And yet, the most chilling part? Moncrief was already in handcuffs before anyone even knew she was gone. August 1, 2020. The sun was just beginning to rise over Plano, Texas. The early morning air was cool, crisp, the kind of morning that runners cherish. The Chisholm Trail, a familiar stretch of winding paths and shaded trees, was coming to life with the rhythmic footsteps of joggers, the distant hum of bicycle wheels rolling over pavement, the occasional bark of a dog enjoying its morning walk. Sarmistha Sen had run this trail countless times. It was her ritual. A moment of solitude before the chaos of the day, before the responsibilities, the deadlines, the emails, the school drop-offs. On this morning, just like any other, she slipped on her running shoes, stepped outside, and disappeared down the path, never realizing she was being followed. She ran, unaware that someone lurked just beyond the tree line, concealed by branches, waiting. A man who had already made up his mind. She was fast, but he was waiting. He knew this trail. Knew where the bends curved just enough to hide what was happening from view. And as she passed the secluded creek bed, he struck. What happened next was brutal. Fast. Violent. A struggle that lasted mere moments but felt like an eternity. She fought hard, but there was no one around to hear her scream. Later, investigators would piece together what they believed happened. She was thrown to the ground, struck repeatedly, each blow more vicious than the last. And then, the final act of violence. Her body, lifeless, was dragged toward the creek bed, hidden beneath the cover of leaves and rocks. A deliberate attempt to erase what had just happened. And then he vanished, leaving behind only chaos, blood, and unanswered questions. The trail wasn't empty for long. Not far from where the attack took place, Another jogger was making their way down the same path, lost in thought, until something caught their eye. Something that didn't belong. At first they thought it was a pile of clothes, maybe a backpack discarded near the water's edge. But as they stepped closer, the horrible reality set in. A frantic call to 911. Breathless words spilling out, "There's someone here. I think she's dead." The dispatcher's voice calm, controlled. Help was on the way. But it was already too late. The police responded quickly, cordoning off the crime scene, searching for any clue as to what had happened. But what they didn't know, what no one knew at that moment, was that the man responsible was already in custody. That same morning, before anyone even realized Sarmistha was missing, police were called to a burglary in progress. A man had broken into a home, rifling through belongings, acting strangely, muttering under his breath. He was arrested on the spot, hauled away for a crime unrelated to the murder. Or so they thought. At the time he was just another suspect in a break-in. But when forensic evidence from the jogging trail came back, DNA found at the scene, microscopic traces of blood, everything changed. It was undeniable. The man already behind bars for burglary was the same man who had taken Sarmistha Sen's life just hours earlier. As the sun rose higher over Plano, Texas, crime scene investigators combed through the jogging trail, marking evidence with numbered flags. What had started as a quiet morning had now transformed into something out of a nightmare. Sarmistha Sen's body had been recovered from the creek bed, her injuries speaking to the sheer violence of the attack. Forensic teams moved methodically, swabbing for DNA, collecting fibers, searching for anything that could tell them who had done this, and why. They didn't have to wait long for answers. The DNA recovered from the scene was unmistakable. It matched someone already in their system, someone who had been arrested just hours after the murder for something seemingly unrelated. Bakary Bayona Moncrief, the same man sitting in a jail cell for burglary, had just been linked to one of the most brutal murders in the city's history. In the hours after Sarmistha Sen was killed, Moncrief didn't flee. He didn't hide. Instead, he walked into a nearby neighborhood. He broke into a home, shuffling through belongings, speaking to himself in hushed tones, seemingly detached from reality. When police arrived at the scene of the burglary, Moncrief didn't resist. He was calm. Almost too calm. Officers noted his erratic speech, his strange mannerisms. But what they didn't know at that moment was that the man in cuffs had just committed something far worse. With DNA evidence placing Moncrief at the crime scene, investigators needed answers. But what they got was something chilling. He didn't deny it. He didn't confess either. Instead, he spoke in cryptic, unsettling statements. He talked about being chosen, about having a purpose, about how he had to do it. It was incoherent, unnerving, and deeply disturbing. Was it mental illness? A delusion? Or was this just another attempt to escape justice? As the case moved to trial, prosecutors had one goal: to ensure that Sarmistha Sen's family got the justice they deserved. But the defense? They had their own strategy. Moncrief's lawyers argued that he suffered from severe mental illness, that he wasn't in control of his actions, that he should be placed in a psychiatric facility rather than a prison. The prosecution disagreed. They painted a different picture. One of a man who had a history of violence. A man who had already been arrested before. A man who made a choice. This was not random. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a cold-blooded, violent act against an innocent woman. And we will not let him hide behind excuses. The jury deliberated for hours. And then, they returned with their decision. Bakary Bayona Moncrief was sentenced to life in prison. No chance of parole. No second chances. For Sarmistha's family it was justice, but not closure. Because no sentence, no punishment, no legal decision could ever bring her back. Outside the courtroom, Sarmistha's husband stepped forward. His voice steady but his grief unmistakable. Husband said, "She was my best friend, my partner, the mother of my children, and she was taken from us in the most brutal way. But today at least we know he can never hurt another person again." The prosecutors echoed the same message. Justice had been served, but the pain left behind was permanent. No family should have to go through this. No woman should have to fear for her safety while jogging in her own neighborhood. This case was about more than just punishment, it was about accountability. Even with the case closed and the verdict delivered, unsettling questions remained. Why did Bakary Bayona Moncrief choose Sarmistha Sen that morning? Was this a premeditated attack, or the result of unchecked mental illness spiraling out of control? And most chillingly, could it have been prevented? In the days following the trial, online forums buzzed with speculation. Some believed Moncrief had been watching Sarmistha for days, waiting for the perfect moment. Others pointed to his past, his criminal record, his erratic behavior, the warning signs that, in hindsight, were flashing red. If someone had intervened earlier, could Sarmistha have been saved? Or was this an act of pure, senseless violence, one that no amount of foresight could have stopped? Plano, Texas, was forever changed. This wasn't just another crime, it was a wake-up call. Women who once felt safe jogging in the early morning light now looked over their shoulders. Families questioned the safety of their own neighborhoods. The fear was real and it was justified. But the city refused to let fear win. Instead, it turned its grief into action. The community rallied together, calling for improved safety measures, more streetlights, emergency call stations, increased patrols along popular jogging routes. And most importantly, a demand for better mental health intervention for those showing signs of violent tendencies. But Sarmistha Sen's story did not end on that jogging trail. Her life, her work, and her passion left behind a legacy that no act of violence could erase. Her colleagues, her friends, and her family ensured that her dedication to cancer research would live on. In her honor, a $500,000 endowment was established to further the very work she had devoted her life to. A woman whose mission was to save lives, taken by the hands of someone who had no regard for life at all. But in the end, her work would continue. And in that, she was victorious. The man responsible for her death will never walk free again. The law has spoken. But justice is not the same as healing. For those left behind, life must go on. But the pain will never truly fade. The empty seat at the dinner table. The birthdays celebrated with one less candle. The echoes of a voice that can never be heard again. Sarmistha Sen was more than a headline, more than a case file, more than a statistic. She was a mother, a wife, a friend, a brilliant mind. And for those who knew her, the loss is immeasurable. Her story should not be forgotten. And it won't be. Justice has been served, but was it enough? Bakery A. Bayona Moncrief will spend the rest of his life behind bars. No parole, no second chances. But some believe he got off too easy. Others argue that life in prison is a harsher sentence than death itself. Now, we turn the question to you. Do you think justice was truly served? Should Moncrief have faced the death penalty? Or was the punishment fitting for the crime? Let's discuss in the comments below. True crime isn't just about the past, it's about the questions that remain, the cases that still haunt us, and the stories that demand justice. If you want more deep dives into cases like this, subscribe now and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Because sometimes, the most dangerous criminals are the ones we never see coming.